Guys, welcome once more. I am your teacher now back on your screen, and we apologize for that technical error which has just occurred. Now that is the lockdown, everything is just having its own way to sabotage us. So, but by the way, we cannot be sabotaged. Now, in the first section of the video, we tried to look at quadratic equation to find the maximum and the minimum value of quadratic equations. So now we look at another section, which is to evaluate or to determine the nature of the roots. So now we look for any given quadratic equation which has the form ax squared, right? This is the quadratic equation, general expression of a quadratic equation, which is equals to 0. The root of this quadratic equation will be equals to x equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So now this is a general expression of the roots of any given quadratic equation. Remember, I told you that the quadratic equation is a quadratic because it has the highest power of 2. So it means that how many roots do we have, or will you have here in this equation? Because the highest power here, or the highest degree of this polynomial is 2. So that means you have 2 solutions of a quadratic equation. So the first solution is the one with the positive here. So we have x1 equals to minus b plus square root of b squared minus 4ac over all over 2a. And the other one, we can call it x2 and have minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, right, over 2a, right? So these are the only 2 roots of any given quadratic equation. So you see the formula here. This formula is called quadratic formula. Use this formula. Most of you, I know, it's your favorite because you just use it to solve for equation. So that is a quadratic formula. So now, given any quadratic equation, you can use that formula to solve or to find your roots. So now we look in this section. We are interested not in finding the roots, but we are interested in determining the nature of our roots. So how do we determine the nature of our roots? So if you see in a quadratic equation, we said the quadratic formula is x equals to minus c plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So now there are conditions, right? There is that thing that determines the nature of roots of quadratic equations, right? So now this part that is under the square root, you see this part that is under the square root is the one that determines the nature of quadratic equation roots, and we call that thing under the square root a discriminant, right? So now the nature of quadratic equation roots, they are determined by the discriminant. The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Right, this is the part that determines the nature of the roots. So now let's write some conditions that we have here. Now let's look. If case 1, we have cases. Case 1, if our discriminant b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, so it means that here we have real and distinct or different root, distinct roots, right? So case 2, if your discriminant now b squared minus 4ac is exactly equals to 0, in this case we have real and equal roots. Then case 3, if now our discriminant, we look at another condition, if now our discriminant is less than 0, so here you have non-real and unequal or distinct equal roots. So now, if we are talking about real and non-real numbers, now real numbers are the numbers that we use daily, that are there in the number line, right? And then when you come to non-real numbers, the numbers that do not exist in real life, they are imaginary. Those numbers, they do not exist, they are imaginary. We call them non-real numbers. The numbers that are there in the timeline, including the rational number, all those numbers are real numbers. Negative and positive numbers of your timeline, those are real numbers. Then non-real, those are your imaginary numbers, also called sometimes complex numbers, right? So they are complex numbers. So now let's go and look at some examples that we have here to determine the nature of the roots of any quadratic equation. So now we erase here, we can erase here. So now we determine the nature of the roots. Determine nature of the roots. So we determine the nature of the roots. The first one is 2x squared plus 2x equals to 0. So now we are asked to determine the nature of the roots. Now you are not asked to find or solve for x. Now you use the discriminant. The discriminant, you said, remember, the discriminant is that thing which is under that square root of a quadratic formula, which is b squared minus 4ac. We evaluate these, right? So in this case, what is our a? Our a is the number that is before a square, which is 2. Our b is equal to 2. So what is our c? Our c is a 0. So by the way, you do not need many things. So now we see our discriminant. Our discriminant, now we find the discriminant value, b squared. In case of b, you put a 2. So you have 2 squared minus 4. A, what is a? Is 2. So you get a 4. That means, and now this thing, is it less than 0 or greater than 0? So now this thing is greater than 0. So what is the implication of this? So you have real and distinct roots, right? So but we can prove that this is true, right? So this thing is greater than 0, and then that means you have a real and distinct roots. So let's see now. That's how you answer that question. You were not asked to find the roots, but now for the purpose of this video, let us look and try to see why are they indeed real and distinct. Distinct means different. Let's try to find the roots. So roots of any quadratic equation, you said they are given by x equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So let's find the roots of this equation. Now we find them, but the question was saying determine the nature of the root, so we have answered and ended here. You don't have to do this, but for the purpose of making sure you understand why is the case, I am finding them for you. But for you, if they say determine the nature of the roots, you end there. So now we put in our b is minus 2 plus or minus square root of b squared, so it's 2 squared minus 4. Where there is a, you put 2. Where there is c, sorry, here you missed something, that is 0. So you have 4ac over 2 times a is 2. So what do you get? You use your calculator to find your x1 and x2. That means you'll have 2 roots. Now I want us to see the case of our roots, right? So now we use our calculator. We press our calculator. Let's see what you get. You have minus 2 plus square root. Now I am using, to find x1, I'm putting plus there. You see, I am putting plus for the first one, which is x.